12-month refill of any FDA-approved contraceptive drug after the insured person has completed the initial supply of these drugs, unless the person requests a smaller supply or the prescriber directs that a smaller supply be dispensed. Insured patients must be allowed to receive the drugs on-site at a healthcare provider's office if it's available there. And then it requires dispensing practices for these contraceptive drugs must follow clinical guidelines for prescribing and dispensing.
For H.3809, we have Anthony Paltrow, Alliance and Health Plans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I appreciate you giving me the time to come and speak today. I represent the Alliance of Health Plans. We are the unified voice of managed care plans in South Carolina. Our members include all 5 Medicaid MCOs in South Carolina, and our commercial plans represent and cover approximately 90% of the insured lives in South Carolina. I'm here today to speak on their behalf in opposition of this bill. The mandated coverage imposed by this bill raises 3 main issues for our members. First is it adversely affects patient safety and will act to ultimately diminish the efficacy of the very treatment that this bill seeks to promote. Second, it opens the door to the possibility of waste, fraud, abuse, and increased costs. And thirdly, it disrupts the free market, which takes away my members or our members' ability to freely contract and account for the general risk associated with coverage, much of which I just explained at points 1 and point 2. These 3 issues, I think, will ultimately work to undermine our members' efforts to provide A, meaningful health care choices, and B, affordable coverage options. If you'll indulge me, I'll go through each of these points briefly and individually before I open any questions. First, regarding the adverse impacts on patient safety. This bill, as written, fails to account for the risk associated with long-term use of this medication, nor does it provide a replacement mechanism for patients who suffer adverse reactions to the initially prescribed medication. Dr. Shalley was here and very eloquently talking about the many side effects that can happen with these drugs, stroke, breast cancer. He also spoke that there's over 100 types of different oral contraception, much less the hormone replacement, insertion, and so forth. Side effects, the bottom line there is side effects for improper use or long-term use could be serious, life-threatening, which is why Dr. Ridgway was recommended just a moment ago that the patient confers regularly with their healthcare provider. This will ensure compliance and make sure that the patient is getting the proper medication that they need to fit their particular health condition. To manage these outcomes, health plans have established protocols with health professionals like Dr. Ridgway, like Dr. Shalley, that include the establishment of a 90-day limit and mail-order prescription, so you get 90 days and you come back and make sure you're being compliant. This usually cuts down on the adverse reaction. So what happens if an insured under this plan, your plan has an adverse reaction? What happens to the remaining dispensed drug? Who pays for the replacement? These are questions I think this bill raises. Regarding the diminished efficacy of treatment, I believe this bill fails to account for the risk associated with improper long-term storage of certain contraceptive medication. Take NuvaRing, for example. The label states that it may only be stored for 4 months at room temperature, and it must be thrown away after expiration. Well, this bill provides that it will be given a 12-month supply. So what happens to the remaining 2/3 of the year thereafter? When you've got contraceptive medication that's no longer effective, or could be no longer effective. I believe this works to maybe go against the aims of this bill. We just said a moment ago that there's over 100 types of oral contraceptives. And normal for normal conventions for prescribing and dispensing is a 90-day supply for automatic refills. It was derived in part because we wanted to short circuit or diminish the efficacy of holding these types of drugs for a long period of time, 12 months or more. Regarding the possibility of waste or fraud, abuse, and increased costs, I believe this bill fails to account for the potential consumer-to-consumer sale or gift of contraceptive medication. The use of unprescribed contraceptive drugs without the advice or consultation of a physician. This would flood the market and open the possibility, possibly for the state creating a secondary market for contraceptive medication, black market as well. The costs associated with the non-compliant users. Mandated coverage does not ensure compliance; it just ensures that the medicine is paid for. Unused medication in the past, as I've read, creates an environmental hazard if it's been disposed of properly, contained water contamination and so forth. Who pays for the costs, as I said a moment ago, replacing lost or misplaced contraceptive drugs? The fraud and abuse potential. Let's say if we've got a mid-year job change, you've got duplicated coverage by different employers. You've got an employer now who may be forced to pay for benefits beyond the employment period. My director also asked that I share that we share, the Alliance shares DHHS's concerns about the fiscal and practical problems as this bill applies to the Medicaid system. Regarding the disruption of the free market, we take away providers, or an insurance provider's ability to fully contract and account for the general risks that are associated with this mandate for coverage. Much like all, and the risks like I've just explained, the waste and the abuse and increased costs, it'll work to decrease the options and diminish the choices that my members are currently able to provide. And also, it'll increase the cost of coverage, which ultimately will be passed on to the consumer, the end user. So in closing, I ask that you reconsider your support of this bill, perhaps not support it, and not send it on to the full committee. Thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Sure, I have a question for you. You mentioned the newer ring has a 4-month shelf life.
Yes, sir.
Tell me, how do you reconcile this? Because in reading the bill indicates that a patient can request a small supply. The physician can actually prescribe a small supply. So if the physician has the knowledge that the new ring only has a 4-month shelf life, then that physician in his or her discretion can say, I'm not going to prescribe a 12-month supply.
It surely could do that, but I mean, this bill puts the negative option on the healthcare provider to do that, whereas he would do it normally. On the other side, I mean, this bill basically says the default position is a year for all contraception. It doesn't make it doesn't talk about reduced efficacy. Now, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, but I think it also assumes that doctors would actually do that and prescribe below, or even think to. Because they normally prescribe it for 4 months. Only they don't put only at the end of the prescription, or they don't put dispense as written at the prescription. They go fill it. Now the patient doesn't know any better. When's the last time you read the white label on the drug that you got? I mean, not everybody does that. So now they've got NuvaRing. Hopefully the doctor said you can keep this in a 4-drop label. But it's not just NuvaRing. That was one of many examples. I mean, oral contraceptives have the same issue.
Yeah, you asked me last time. I'm an attorney. I read for a living, so I read everything.
As am I, so I understand.
And what I'm reading is I'm not understanding the position that you put forth is that it requires a physician to prescribe a 12-month supply. I don't get that it says you mandates that they do that. Now, they have the option to do that, and I think the bill says that it must be covered, but they are not mandated to do the 12-month supply.
Well, the way I read the bill, sir, and if I'm reading it wrong, I appreciate you clarifying it for me. The way I read the bill is that if prescribed without, further, just here's the prescription for the contraceptive, but it's the patient's choice to go and say, I want a year. And if they ask for a year, then it is dispensed and covered by mandate. Am I wrong in reading that?
Okay. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
We have any questions from the members of the committee? Dr. Ridgeway.
Question. The shelf life for new green is 4 months at room temperature.
That's what I was told when I read the label.
What's the shelf life if it's kept in the refrigerator?
I have no idea, sir. I'm happy to get you the answer to that question if you'd like me to.
Thank you. So a new green does not expire after 4 months. Is that correct? The expiration date's not 4 months from manufacture.
You're the doctor, sir. I do not know. All I know is when I read the label, it says it's unsafe to be kept past 4 months. That could be a liability issue that they're mandated to put in the label of the medication. But it's still on the label.
I'm just trying to clarify things for everybody else.
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned compliance. As a physician, before I would write a prescription allowing somebody to refill it for a year, I have developed a relationship, like Dr. Sally said, with that patient. And I can tell which patients are going to be compliant as a rule and which ones are not. So a lot of times, if I feel a patient's going to be compliant, I'll write a prescription for birth control pills and I'll refill it for a year. They don't have to see me for a whole year. And whether they get it 1 month at a time, 4 months at a time, or however, they're not going to see me for another year because I've already evaluated their physical condition, done a risk factor assessment, all the things Dr. Sally said. And so it's not just like Dr. Sally said, come in and write a prescription and be on your way. The original prescription has to be written by a practitioner, and they have to do the proper evaluation to see if this patient is a patient that could have a prescription for a year or not. And I just wanted to make sure that we were understanding the same thing.
Yes, sir, and I understand you're a very fine doctor, as is Dr. Sally. That's not my wife's doctor. I think y'all are the example that should be the rule. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that everyone lives to your example. And that's the concern that I would have.
Let me ask you a question. You also mentioned in your opening statements that it would have an adverse impact on patient safety. Elaborate more on how it would adversely affect patient safety.
Well, by what we just talked about, we're presuming that they're going to be, the patient will be compliant. We're also presuming that the doctor that prescribes the medication is of the caliber of Dr. Ridgeway and Dr. Sally. But not every doctor is that way, not every patient is so compliant. So, in the situations where we're not in the ICU, patient safety is diminished because you're sitting with a drug now that you can't afford otherwise to replace. But you've got to sit there and choose, this is, I'm going to take this drug, or I'm not. In taking it, you may have further risk for, as Dr. Sykes said, this breast cancer. There's the fact that you're using the drug that might not be best suited for your health state. Particularly, if say you're in a population where you don't get a chance to see the doctor very often, or if you're going into an emergency care or planned parenthood situation. That's the concern we have, is that you're dispensing, in not the ideal situation where the doctor has now built a relationship with the parent, with the patient, and has that knowledge of the continuity of care. In situations outside that ideal, this potential adverse effects, it can go on continue until that person can get back to a doctor.
Yes, sir. Would you agree that those situations are present now? Everything that you just articulated is present now.
Right, what's not present now, sir, is the default mandate that the prescription be given at 12 months. Right, what's present now is you've got the option of a 3-month mail order. What's present now is you've got a month to month. Come back to the doctor and presume compliance. What we've got now is a 12-month refill, which you still got to come back in a year, but they're refilled every month, not one at a time. ensure compliance, because you know they're going back getting a refill. So at least you can tell they're taking the medication.
Right, which takes me back to my original premise, is that it's not a mandate that the physician write a 12-month prescription. You say default, but it's not a mandate. So I'm just confused, but in the interest of time, let's move on. I have one more question.
Yeah.
You also mentioned fraud. Describe what fraud would take place if we were to pass this bill.
The possibility of fraud would be, like I said, if this bill passes, now you fast forward ahead a year. You'd have to agree that there's a possibility that we're going to flood the market with contraceptive medication that's been paid for. Fraud could possibly be the shared, and this isn't fraud, but this is abuse, shared use without consultation with a physician. Sale of like patient to patient, I should say consumer to consumer sale of product. Or like I said before, you've got the potential abuse of people, let's say mid-year change jobs, they've got 2 different coverages, now they've doubled their prescription. Because you see what I mean? So those are some of the potential issues. And you agree, I think the purpose of the bill is to flood the market with contraceptives, people have access and use. Those are natural
I
problems.
get you. It sounds like you're trying to draw a correlation between contraceptives and maybe oxycodone. I don't foresee women going out on the black market purchasing birth control.
No, sir, but
I don't care.
I agree, but there's a possibility, there's also a possibility of sharing. Let's say that one person doesn't feel comfortable going out, maybe they're too young. And they'd like to be given their friends in high school, and they want birth control. Parents will let them have it. That's a possibility. I mean, I agree with the black market is the doomsday scenario.
Thank you, sir, for letting me speak. I'm not on the subcommittee, but since I am on 3M and I happen to be a woman, last I checked, I have to say that being a woman, being that we are the holders of life, it's a nuisance. I will speak freely in front of everyone in the room and that's for that. I enjoy being married to my husband. I also find it a real pain in the rear that I have to worry about, getting to the doctor at the right time and the right day of the month, or there's a potential that I could change and alter the course of my life, my husband's life, and generations to come. So the fact that this is available, that the bill is to make it available, I find it highly unlikely that we'll be on the corner swapping out Orvo 28s, or if I'm taking the care to get the prescription, that because I'm a grown adult, I'm over 18 years old, that I do read my prescription bottles to say, oh, this is something that has expired. I mean, if we're taking the cause to go to the doctor and get the prescription in the first place, I hearken that this is just, I appreciate what you do for a living, but it seems to be more that they just don't want to put out the money in advance just in case it's a wasted, doesn't get taken. That's the way it's occurring. I think the bill actually is very, very good. I appreciate that as a woman.
Thank you, Representative. You do represent the best among us as far as getting access to care and labels and so forth. Thank you for the questions.
No, sir.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Next we have Ann Warner, Women's Rights and Empowerment. I do not want to cut anyone short, it's just we have about 9 minutes. Before we have to.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chairman Hart and members of the Health and Environmental Affairs Subcommittee. You have the entire testimony in front of you, so I will make it brief this morning. My name is Ann Warner, and I am the CEO of WREN, the Women's Rights and Empowerment Network, a statewide, nonpartisan nonprofit that is building a movement to advance the health, economic well-being, and rights of South Carolina's women, girls, and their families. Today, I am here to ask for your support on H.3809, a bill that would require insurance providers to cover a 1-year supply of birth control at a time. I'd also like to thank Representative Ridgway for his sponsorship of the bill. A woman's ability to choose whether and when to become pregnant has a direct and positive impact on her health, her education, and her economic well-being, as well as that of her children. Greater control over childbearing reduces rates of unintended pregnancies, contributes to healthier pregnancies, and increases the opportunities that women have to pursue education and advance their careers. While the benefits are numerous, the barriers to the consistent usage of contraception are also numerous. Women who lack reliable transportation, live in rural areas, or have complicated schedules face significant barriers to dependable birth control access. H.3809 will help alleviate many of these barriers simply by allowing women to receive a year's supply of contraceptives at one time. Since Representatives Findley and Bernstein have introduced this bill, we've heard from more than 400 South Carolinians who support this bill. I'm going to read you just a couple of quotes from some of these folks. Danielle J., a medical professional, shares her experience that, quote, as an OBGYN, I can attest to the barriers many of my patients face when trying to access contraception. The 12-month supply bill would help remove some of these barriers and allow women to lead healthy, productive lives. Patty W. from Columbia says, it was my consistent use of women's health services that allowed me to break the cycle of unintended teen pregnancy in my family. Because I got reliable access to birth control, I was young and unmarried. I never had to make difficult choices about whether or not to terminate an unwanted pregnancy, nor did I have to consider raising a child before I was ready. I'm going to skip some of the other compelling quotes from other women and say that on behalf of these women and the thousands of South Carolinians, both women and men, who have benefited from contraception to plan their families, I ask that you vote yes to H.3809. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Mr. Collins.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm a fiscal conservative, and one thing that jumped out at me was this fiscal impact. But then when you mentioned unwanted pregnancies, I would imagine it would only take 1 or 2 unwanted pregnancies to cover what the cost of this would be. Do you agree with that?
I would agree with that. The data that we have is that studies show that women who receive a 12-month supply of contraception were 30% less likely to have an unintended pregnancy. Unintended pregnancies have significant costs to a woman, to her family, and to society at large. So if we can reduce unwanted contraceptives, we actually have a positive impact on the economic status of our state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Lynn T., Legal Women Voters.
Hello, I am Lynn T. from the League of Women Voters. Thank you very much for hearing me today. We strongly support this bill. We believe it's a common sense measure that will help women and that it will reduce the number of unintended pregnancies. That is the history of it, which I think should be a goal that all of us can appreciate. I will add that personally, I am 68 years old, but I have a long memory. And I'm a professional archaeologist. I spent a lot of my youth, young adult years in other countries, in locations that were so isolated that it was hours by dirt road to get to the nearest store of any kind. I would have loved to have been able to have this sort of access to contraception at that point in my life. I will also say that I recall physicians being cautious when they started me on a new regimen, checking back after a few months to see how it was going and make sure there were no side effects before prescribing a longer dosage. I believe that the concerns that have been expressed can largely be addressed simply by the physician-patient relationship because responsible physicians do attend to these matters. So we hope that you will give a favorable report to this bill. We believe it would be an excellent thing for the women of South Carolina, for their families, and for the state as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Next, we have Nikki Ringer, Planned Parenthood.
I'm watching the clock. I'm Vicki Ringer, South Carolina Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood, South Atlantic. I stand here today to represent the thousands of South Carolina women, men, and teens who rely on Planned Parenthood for reproductive health care. We urge you to vote yes on HB 3809. Our experience is that women are wise consumers of health care. They neither waste nor fraudulently use or abuse birth. More than a half century ago, birth control has been nothing short of revolutionary for women. Allowing physicians to prescribe a year's supply of birth control to patients will further reduce unintended pregnancy, teen pregnancy, and abortion, all of which are at historic lows. Ultimately, this bill does all good things for women and families in South Carolina. We thank you for sponsoring this legislation and supporting it.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we approve this bill and send it on full committee.
Move the proper second that we report 3809 out favorably. Clerk call roll.
Mr. Hart?
Aye.
Mr. Ridgely?
Aye.
Mr. Dixon is absent. Mr. Wheeler? The bill gets a favorable report by 3 to 0.
Okay, and we are very creative. We can H 3487, we